philosophical quandaries as I recall them occurring. Some of those moments have been rendered as dialogues between myself and my travel companions. Other problems are linguistic in nature. Somewhat confusingly, there exist two systems for romanizing Korean words. A variant of the older McCune-Reischauer system is still used in North Korea, while in South Korea, a revised romanization system has been in official use since 2000. To add more confusion to the matter, most proper nouns retain the old McCune-Reischauer system in both Koreas. For example, the romanization of the common last name remains Kim, rather than the revised romanized Gim. And Pyongyang, Pyongyang, has still not shifted to the revised Pyongyang, Pyeongyang. Given the predominance of this convention across most English language literature, and since it was in North Korea where I first began to learn the language, I have mostly retained the North's version of the McCune-Reischauer romanization system throughout the book, going so far as to retain the practice of dehyphenating first names, which are always written after the last name. In the South, it would be Jong-un. In the North, it's Jong-un. Despite all these challenges, I have tried to put forth only things that I know and firmly believe to be true. Any mistakes are mine and mine alone. Prologue. Obsessions lead people on strange detours, and sometimes those detours come to define the entire geography of a person's existence. Watching the fall of the Berlin Wall as a 10-year-old in the living room of a suburban house in the American South, I could not have fathomed the immense significance of what I was seeing. Sure, I had been taught that communism was something bad, the polar opposite of the pristine democracy I had been raised in and programmed to cherish. And I could understand that this evil was now coming to an end. Everything was black and white, good and bad, rough and smooth. A 10-year-old growing up in those sheltered circumstances has no real cognizance of the actual texture of things, of ways of life that differ tremendously from one's own. A little more than a decade later, I'd be walking the streets of those same gray Central European cities my childhood eyes had witnessed coming undone on the evening news. I've lived in two of those cities, Prague and Berlin, for most of my 20s and 30s. Whenever I'm asked what brought me to live in these capitals of some of the past century's darkest and most significant moments, I fail to offer a pithy reply. Something along that stretch of adolescence and early adulthood derailed me from the standard life trajectory that my southern suburban upbringing implied. A growing fascination with other ways of life led me first to New York City to study art, literature, and philosophy at a left-leaning university where nearly all subjects were viewed through the lens of a Marxist interpretation of history. I became fascinated with cultic systems of belief and their twistings of ideology, with the notion of escape, with revising my limited means of perception. The best way to do this, I discovered, was through constant movement, never staying in the same place for long, shirking any scene that might come too close to resembling the dreaded comfort zone. As my friends in Berlin, where I have been lately based, will tell you, I spend a lot of my time escaping that city for others, the notion of a static, stable place called home being increasingly nebulous. In short, I became a writer. My model, the Baudelarian flaneur Robert Walser's destinationless Spazieganger, the wanderer whose ultimate allegiance is to no nation, no collective, and no ideology, but to the city in the broadest sense, the chaotic and confused metropolis, the crazed church of constant motion where poetic creation is born. Unlike Baudelaire, who had to stick with Paris, the possibilities of travel being what they were in the 19th century, I am fortunate to live in an era when travel is easier and cheaper than ever before. The cities of the world, in all their rich plurality, have become my extended stomping ground. Since my addiction to motion is what feeds my writing, the main purpose of travel for me is to get lost.